Paige McPherson, a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So AI in classrooms has really been a topic that hasn't been talked about a lot, certainly with the Ontario government. We've had conversations with the Minister of Education in the past about what they're doing, but this new data from the Fraser Institute seems to suggest that teachers themselves are a bit concerned about what's happening with AI in education.
That's right. So, in conjunction with Leger, we conducted a survey of teachers across Canada in grades 6 to 12 in all school types. And what the survey really showed is that in Ontario, as well as really across the country, teachers are feeling ill-equipped when it comes to policies that create guardrails around staff or student use in schools with AI, with respect to AI. And also, there's a deficit in training when it comes to teachers, both on training for how to identify student AI use, as well as their own AI use in the classroom. A large share of teachers are feeling that they're not receiving that training from their school or school board in Ontario.
And what's the danger of having teachers in the system who aren't trained with what is a rapidly not just emerging technology, but a heavily utilized technology all across the province?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and evidence from other surveys showing that students are using AI a lot of times in their own take-home work, but also classrooms are starting to implement it. There was a recent town hall, the Toronto District School Board, which revealed to parents, many of whom didn't know, that actually some schools are actually using AI in the classrooms. Teachers are using AI for a variety of different uses. And while some people might say, okay, that's great, AI is an information highway for kids, we need guardrails, right? Just like on regular highways. If you want kids to be using this technology, we need to be guiding its use, because a lot of the criticism of AI, or the concern around it, is that it's going to, first of all, replace student work altogether when it comes to homework, but also replace their ability to think critically and analyze material in schools. And I think that's the real concern.
Right. One University of Toronto professor I'd spoken to had indicated that, the fundamentals of critical thinking would be lost here by a generation of kids if they're only exposed to artificial intelligence. Has the Fraser Institute identified, what is a safe way to deploy artificial intelligence in the classroom?
I think it's such a rapidly evolving technology. It's really difficult for anybody to give that answer. And that really is up to school boards or individual schools to decide. And maybe it's up to individual teachers. But I think the bottom line of this survey is showing that there just really are not a lot of policies around this. So our survey showed that only 41.1% of teachers in Ontario, grades 6 to 12, said there was a policy for staff use of AI in schools. And only about half of teachers surveyed, so 50.7% in Ontario, said there was a policy for student AI use. So there's no policy that's allowing teachers to say, nope, you're not allowed to use AI for your homework, for example. And then when it came to identifying students who are using AI, only 37.1% of teachers in Ontario, grades 6 to 12, said that they'd received training from their school or board in identifying student AI use. And anyone who's used AI knows that it can be actually quite sophisticated. Students could quite easily replace their own take-home essays or assignments with AI, even training AI to do it in their own voice. It's very difficult for teachers to identify it, difficult for parents to identify it. So I think what this survey really shows is that there's a deficit in a very important area where teachers are going to need to be equipped to deal with this. If this is indeed the future that we're facing, teachers need the training and policies to guide that.
Where do you think those training modules should come from? Should it be based on the individual school, the school board, or should it be coming down from the Ministry of Education, from Queen's Park, essentially?
Well, I think, this is something that it's really, we surveyed across school types. So there's going to be some independent schools that are going to be figuring this out. There's going to be government-funded public schools that are figuring this out. And it might differ from school board to school board. And it's certainly something that the Ministry of Education, I think, should be looking at when it comes to the use of AI by students, and also training for teachers in the classroom. Our surveys showed that over half just slightly over half, so 55.4% of teachers in Ontario in grades 6 to 12 had training for how to use AI in class for their lessons and other materials. So we know from some other survey data that teachers are using AI in the classroom, but they are not really receiving specific training on their professional development days, or they say that they're not, when it comes to their own use in the classroom. So this might be left up school to school, but the bottom line is that really these policies and trainings just aren't in place, according to a large share of teachers that we surveyed.
I'm wondering what the Fraser Institute would say regarding the speed of which the government needs to act here. AI is such a rapidly evolving technology, and at the same time, the curiosity around AI and how to apply it is also rather high, certainly with a lot of young learners in the province. How fast do you think the province or school board should be moving here to get ahead of this?
I think that, we can't expect government to move at the speed of technology. So they're never going to truly get ahead of this. The policy might be that they decide you're not allowed to have AI use in schools. It could be something like that. Or it could be that let's train students on how to use it reasonably. We saw from our survey that only 42.5% of teachers in Ontario in grades 6 to 12 said that they had received training from their school or board on how to instruct students on how to reasonably use AI. So I think that there needs to be swift movement on this, at least to start developing some policies, whatever those policies might be, or at the very least providing training to teachers who are facing this reality, so that they can either help equip their students. For those who are advocates of students using AI, what we're showing is that, the majority of teachers have said they have not received training on how to instruct their students on how to use it reasonably, which means that, they're not really able to guide their students, or they haven't received training for how to guide their students on appropriate AI use, which might be, maybe research, or there might be some reasonable uses in there. But if the teachers aren't receiving that kind of training, it's going to be difficult to support the students. And I think there's a really reasonable question about whether or not these school boards and schools are adequately supporting teachers, and maybe about whether the government is adequately supporting the school boards and the teachers on this.
Okay, Paige McPherson with the Fraser Institute. Thanks much for joining me.
Thank you.